girlfriend of a Boston police officer whose body was found
in the murder trial of Karen Reed after the jury said it was unable to
they
reach
will
a
retry
verdict.
Karen Reed
is
after a
accused
judge
of
declared a missing.
Hi, alternates. It feels like an eternity since I've been with you all, but Tabitha and I had to divide the work since she was going to be heading to CrimeCon in London, so I stayed behind to do the tail end of week 7. And with an impromptu court date off, alas, it feels like forever. But I have some good news. We are nearing the end of the defense case. I imagine it will be followed by a few days or maybe just a day or two of rebuttal, and then the case will be released to the jury. With that, let's get into day 28. I will suggest that if you can, this is the episode where you will want to watch video if possible. So check us out on YouTube or Spotify. On day 28, we heard from only one defense witness, and that was Dr. Daniel Wolf, the director of accident reconstruction at ARCA. Dr. Wolf's testimony is to the defense what Dr. Welcher is to the prosecution. Dr. Welcher, you might recall, was the blue paint guy. So Dr. Wolf conducted various tests in an attempt to prove or disprove theories. But first, the one thing that Dr. Wolf did was that he explained that the taillight on Karen Reed's vehicle has layers. It's not just one giant layer of plastic, but there is one outer layer and an inner layer. And the thing about Karen's taillight is that it was shattered on both layers. Okay. First, let's discuss the glass cup theory. Dr. Wolf said that he used a cannon, yes, a cannon launcher, to essentially launch a glass cup at Karen's taillight to see if it would shatter the taillight. Basically, he was attempting to see if, let's say, for example, John O'Keefe maybe threw a glass at Karen's taillight, whether or not that would cause damage. And the two speeds that he used for the cannon were 31 miles per hour and 37 miles per hour. Here was that result.
Is this the photograph that was just marked as Exhibit 213 that's in front of you?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jurors what they're looking at?
So on the left part, you are looking at a frame from the high-speed video just after the contact with the taillight. On the right, you're looking at the post-damage to the taillight after the glass had been fired into it.
And if we could look at the next exhibit with the court's permission.
Okay.
And what are we looking at here?
Same thing on the left. Again, this is the 37-mile-an-hour test. The glass striking just in the area where the bottom of the turn signal indicator is, so right where it meets the red portion of the lens and the clear portion of the lens. That's about where the impact point was. You could see that a large portion of the outer red assembly, lens cover is missing and fractured. The clear portion of the part of the outer lens to the turn signal indicator is also fractured, as well as the underlying clear diffusers in that assembly.
Would your testing in both of these scenarios, the 31-mile-an-hour test and the 37-mile-an-hour test, represent an accepted methodology for controlling for aim, velocity, impact site, and those issues, if you will, as it relates to testing of this sort?
Yes, we were able to control those variables.
And is that an accepted methodology in the area or the field of accident reconstruction?
Absolutely, yes.
When you finished your testing, were you able to make a determination as to whether or not either one of these velocities, the 31-mile-an-hour velocity or the 37-mile-an-hour velocity, were consistent with the damage that you saw on the subject Lexus, which is the 2021 Lexus belonging to Ms. Reed?
Yes, from the 37-mile-per-hour test, we are getting damage that's generally consistent, and that I mentioned we have portions of the outer lens missing, the underlying diffuser. There was also some fracturing on the backside of the assembly. So again, we observed damage that was generally consistent with that of the subject taillight.
And that was the 31 or the 37?
The 37.
The 37. What about the 31?
Didn't have enough energy to create that damage.
So were you able to conclude, in your opinion, whether or not the velocity of that glass hitting the taillight would have to be somewhere in the vicinity of 37 miles an hour, well above 30 miles an hour?
well above, and it certainly could have been above 40 miles per hour per se. I mean, we may have actually blown out more of the outer lens had the speed increased.
Did you have any information in the data or documents that you reviewed associated with this case, for instance, that John O'Keefe had a pneumatic cannon with him out there?
No.
Okay. So obviously, well, let me ask a different way. Based on this series of tests, were you concluding that the damage on the taillight conclusively was the product of a glass being hurled into the taillight?
Objection.
Sustained.
Were you concluding, or did you opine, that the damage to the taillight came from a drinking glass?
No, I gave an opinion that the damage was generally consistent with that in the test, compared to the subject taillight.
But only in the circumstance where the glass is being hurled at 37 miles an hour, correct?
Sustained. Can ask it differently.
Under what circumstance did you determine that it was consistent with a drinking glass?
If that drinking glass, again, the purpose of the test was to do a test to evaluate or simulating somebody throwing a drinking glass at the taillight. So that's what that test was to demonstrate.
Understood.
Next, Dr. Wolf discussed using an exemplar vehicle to Karen Reed's and using multiple right rear taillights to run these tests, meaning that after every single test, they would replace the right taillight with a brand new one. That way there was no, like, you know how sometimes you can kind of like weaken something if it has already been in an accident, even if it didn't break the first time. So he always used a new taillight. Dr. Wolf undertook various tests to test out Dr. Welcher, his theory. And Dr. Welcher was the prosecution's witness. And remember, Dr. Welcher, his testing relied on John O'Keefe's arm being bent at that 90 degrees and holding that glass cup. But Dr. Welcher only used blue paint, and the car was driving at 2 miles per hour. So the tests that Dr. Welcher conducted, in my personal opinion, were minimal. And I'm sure that the jury agrees. Dr. Wolf, however, used various speeds in conducting his own tests. He started out at 10 miles per hour, then he went to 17 miles per hour, 24 miles per hour, and 29 miles per hour. And I believe the first two he conducted in the lab, and we're going to see that here in a second. And then he did the test at 24 and 29 miles per hour using just an arm and then using a crash dummy with an arm. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Dr. Wolf also used a test dummy arm, and he even used a 200-pound dummy to conduct 2 of the tests. Not all of them, but 2 of the tests. He did use a full body dummy. Additionally, he used various cameras to record the results, and that's what you will be seeing today, which is why it's so important for you to take the time to watch this video. Basically, after every test, Dr. Wolf showed pictures of what the test taillight looked like after the impact. In essence, he wanted to compare the sample taillight after this test with what Karen's taillight looked when her vehicle was seized, or after it was at the Sally Port, right? I will note one thing. I think that Dr. Wolf's tests were extremely beneficial, but here, you take a look and decide if they were beneficial for the defense or the prosecution.
What are tests A and B? What are those laboratory tests?
So these were the initial 2 tests that we did to get an idea of starting to test this hypothesis. As I mentioned, we weren't sure at 10 miles an hour what would happen to the taillight. We wanted to see what would happen at 17 miles an hour with the arm. So again, it was to evaluate from a starting point what happens in this interaction based upon how Dr. Welcher had his arm oriented in his PowerPoint analysis.
Next slide, please. What is this?
So you're looking at a photograph of our lab setup. You can see on the left side of that is our Hybrid 3 anthropomorphic test device. To the right is a linear impactor, and this is something we already have in-house that we built years ago for our testing that we do for the National Hockey League when we're looking at what's the accelerations on an impact to a goalie wearing a helmet, right? We use this same device for that type of testing to measure head acceleration. So we applied this same linear impactor to be able to project, if you will, or accelerate the taillight at a known speed into the ATD arm.
What are some of the instrumentation that you use in addition to the mechanical impactor? What's some of the instrumentation you use to track the data?
Certainly. So you can see, I'll get my, see around here. So at the top here, there's a blue camera here. There's another blue camera here. So these are our high-speed cameras. And you'll see there's a bunch of lights around those high speeds. That's just because the frame rate's so high. And again, it's only sampling a very, very short amount of time. So you have to have a lot of light when you do these high-speed tests. So we have the high-speed cameras running. We have an accelerometer mounted to the ATD arm here on the other side. So that's some of the instrumentation. There's also a couple other cameras that we're documenting this overall.
Can we move to the next slide, please? What are we looking at in these photographs?
So this is looking at, and not to be confused, this wasn't the arm position when the impact occurred. This is just showing you the setup. So on the left is just kind of an overall shot, and then on the right here is a uniaxial accelerometer. So that's going to measure, we talked about that term earlier, right? The acceleration. So that's going to measure how quickly is this arm changing its speed, right? What's the acceleration of the arm as it's impacted?
Does that accelerometer put into motion some of the mathematical formulations that you talked about earlier?
Yes.
Let's move to the next slide, please. Tell me about these photographs.
So the importance of this is, more specifically looking at the right photograph here, might be a little bit hard to see, but we wanted to get the same exact sweatshirt or hoodie for the testing to evaluate if the taillight breaks, is there a mechanism for the fragments to penetrate and cause holes in the sweatshirt as were observed in Mr. John O'Keefe's sweatshirt?
Next slide. Were you successful in finding the exact replica sweatshirt?
Yes, and I will note, as I mentioned, I know it probably is hard to see, but the material blend on the sleeves are the exact same. They are 60% cotton and 40% polyester.
Was it important in your mind to maintain consistency with the data that you had received concerning John O'Keefe's clothing?
Certainly, I think we wanted to try to control as many variables as we could.
Let's move to the next slide, please. Test A. Describe test A for us, please.
So you're going to see a series of photographs and then videos, but test A was mounting a preconditioned taillight on that linear impactor to accelerate it into the Hybrid 3 arm to, again, evaluate the damage to the taillight and the acceleration to the arm.
Let's move to the next slide, please. What are we looking at in these photographs?
So you're looking on the left, a photograph just before the impact test was conducted. On the right, you're looking at a thermal image that is depicting the temperature profile of the taillight.
Describe that thermal image.
Certainly. Your Honor, may I refer to my notes?
Yes.
So what I did is I analyzed the profile of the temperature down in this area. And when we look at that segment, that lower portion here, where contact was made, the average temperature in that area was about 34 degrees with a minimum of about 33 degrees.
How did you get that exemplar taillight down to around freezing?
So all of the taillights that we tested were preconditioned overnight in a freezer.
Why was that important?
Well, it's my understanding that at the time that this allegedly occurred, the ambient temperature was 31 degrees Fahrenheit. So as I mentioned earlier, certainly there's a correlation between how plastics perform in cold weather. So we wanted to take that variable into account in our testing to precondition them down to temperatures that were consistent with at the time of the alleged incident.
Next slide, please. What are we looking at in this slide, on this photograph?
So this is a video. Do you want me to go ahead and play the video?
Tell us what we're about to see, and then I'll ask the court's permission.
So you were looking at a camera that is mounted above the entire setup. If you look at the top portion of this video, you will see the taillight. Part of it's covered by the high-speed camera. But what will happen is the linear impactor will fire, and the taillight will be accelerated up to 10 miles per hour, striking the closed ATD arm.
With the court's permission,
Okay.
let's go ahead and play the video. Next slide, please. What is this?
So this is also a video, but with the high-speed camera. So it's the high-speed camera that's looking top down at the arm. So you will see when the video plays, you will see the taillight enter from the left and contact the arm. And I will note that this is essentially slow mode, so it's not happening in real time. So you'll see the taillight slowly moving, but it's actually in reality moving at 10 miles per hour.
Understood. Go ahead and play that. Can I ask a question now that that's played? How did you mount the taillight to the accelerator, the linear accelerator?
Right, so we had to get a little bit creative there because you may have observed this when we had the physical assembly out earlier. The back of that, it's not some nice clean surface that we can just bolt on. So what we had to do is 3D print a bracket that we could bolt onto the linear impactor, and we used a polyurethane expanding foam to be able to marry those two together so that we could then bolt it onto the linear impactor to use it for this test.
Did you see any debris from that foam mounting mechanism?
Yes, there's a few flakes you can see of that polyurethane foam off the backside kind of going into being dispersed there.
Okay. With regard to this particular 10-mile-an-hour test, what did you note in terms of the damage to the taillight?
It was very minimal.
And what did you note in terms of any damage at all to the hoodie?
There was none.
Can we go to the next slide, please? What are we looking at in this slide?
So this is looking at a side view, so same test, just looking at it from the side. And similarly, you'll see the taillight come from the left and impact the arm.
If we could play this, please. What did you note in terms of deflection of the arm, the test arm?
Well, the arm essentially, and we'll see this in the data later, it reaches a common velocity with the taillight. Based upon the portion of the arm that was contacted, again, consistent with how Dr. Welcher has it oriented, it will become accelerated up to 10 miles an hour roughly.
Over approximately what period of time is that arm accelerated up to 10 miles an hour along with the taillight?
We'll see it on the data plots. I think it's about 10 milliseconds or so.
How long, do you know how long an eye blink on average takes?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't. Probably pretty quick.
Somewhere around 250 milliseconds? Does that sound right?
Sustained.
Let's move to the next slide, please. What are we looking at in this series of photographs?
So these are extracted frames from the high-speed video that we just saw on the previous slide, basically showing just at contact, just after contact, and then post-contact, so you can see the kinematics of the arm and how the arm is moving.
Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. What is this photograph?
So this is photographs taken of the taillight after the 10-mile-an-hour test. I will note that there was a couple small fragments of the clear portion of the assembly, the outer lens that was missing from that turn signal area towards the left here. There's a couple fragments missing, and then there was some small fracturing here in that area.
How would you describe the damage to the taillight of the 10-mile-an-hour test?
If I may go to the next slide, I think it might.
Sure.
So this was the totality of that damage at 10 miles per hour. So I would describe it as minimal and superficial.
Okay. Next slide, please. What is this?
So this is the photograph that I just shown you compared to that of the subject taillight so that you can have a side-by-side comparison of the test taillight compared to that of the subject.
Were you able to reach any opinions and conclusions about whether the damage to the subject taillight is consistent with striking an arm at 10 miles an hour?
It's inconsistent, in my opinion.
Next slide, please. This is still test A, is that correct?
Correct.
Were you able to reach any opinions or conclusions as to whether or not the damage to Mr. O'Keefe's clothing is consistent with being struck by the taillight at 10 miles per hour?
What I observed from the test is that there was no mechanism to create any of the holes that we observed on the subject sweatshirt.
Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty,
Yes.
as well as the former opinion that you just gave us?
Yes.
Okay, so I did play that lengthy clip, and if you watch the actual trial and then you watch that clip, I did speed it up just for, I wanted to keep this brief. And it was lengthy, but I wanted you to hear Dr. Wolf describe all the tests that he conducted. But here are the results for the remaining tests.
Can we go ahead and go to the next slide, please? What do you note about this impact?
So one of the things you'll see is kind of that dust cloud that you see. Again, that's all the particulates from the expanding foam that we use. So that's kind of what you see in the background there, kind of going over kind of the arm and the taillight there.
Do you note more damage or less damage to the taillight at 17 miles an hour versus the 10 mile an hour test?
There is more damage, yes.
Let's go to the next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So you're looking at a top-down view from the high-speed camera. You'll see the taillight enter from the left, impacting the arm at about 17 miles per hour.
Okay, go ahead and play it. Can you describe the decoupling that's shown here?
Absolutely. So as you can see, where the two are basically married together, right? It's kind of actually coming back together now. So that bond that we had, right? This is the most effective way that we could mount it to the impactor. It just became detached due to the force of that impactor stopping at the end of the stroke.
Understood. Next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
So in this slide, you're looking at another high-speed video. This is just a side view. Again, you're going to see the taillight enter the frame from the left, impacting the arm at 17 miles per hour.
Is this in slow motion as well?
This is in slow motion, correct, not real time.
Okay. What do you note in terms of the deflection on the arm?
The arm, as we saw in the previous one, is accelerated up, so it's moving now at roughly a common velocity with what the impact speed was.
And what did you note about the damage to the taillight?
It was more significant than the 10-mile-an-hour test, which, again, there was very minimal damage to that, where several fragments of that red outer lens fractured as well as the clear lens.
Okay, next slide. And what is this depicting?
This is extracted frames from the previous video just showing right at contact, during contact, and post-contact.
Next slide, please. What is this a photograph of?
This photograph is depicting the damage to the taillight at the conclusion of the test, where, again, it's missing fragments of the outer red lens. I will note that the interior diffusers and plastic components are intact in this test.
When you say intact, what do you mean?
They are not damaged or broken.
At all?
Correct, at all.
Next slide, please. What is that a picture of?
Another photograph showing the taillight post-test. Again, no damage to the underlying diffusers in terms of being cracked, shattered, or broken.
And what did you note in terms of the damage to the outer acrylic, the red piece?
It broke into a few fragments, and I think on the next slide I depict those in a photograph.
Let's take a look at that. What is that?
So this is a photograph depicting the collection of the fragments post-test. I will note there's one clear piece, one red piece, another clear piece, and then there is one more red piece in this bag. So the outer lens broke into approximately 4 pieces in the 17-mile-per-hour test. And I'll point out one other thing just because you can see it in the photograph. This is that 3D printed bracket that we used to bolt it onto the linear impactor with the foam on the other side that mounted it to the taillight.
Thank you for that. Next slide, please. What is this a picture of, or pictures of?
This is a side-by-side comparison showing a depiction of the 17-mile-an-hour test impact to the test taillight, comparing it to that of the subject taillight.
Were you able to reach any conclusions or opinions as to whether or not the damage to the subject taillight on the right is consistent with striking an arm at 17 miles per hour?
It's inconsistent from a damage perspective.
What's the basis of that opinion?
The test that I've just showed you all.
Was that testing that we've just talked about conducted in accordance with the scientific literature and generally accepted methodologies that you've earlier described?
Yes.
Is the damage to the right rear taillight consistent with striking John O'Keefe's arm at 17 miles per hour?
No.
Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
Slide 45, please. What is this?
You're looking at photographs post-test of the sweatshirt that the ATD was wearing at the time of the impact.
Is this the 17-mile-an-hour impact?
Correct, yes.
Did you note any defects in the fabric of the right arm?
There were no punctures, holes, or fraying of the material during this impact test.
Based on this testing that you conducted in this case, is the damage that you saw of the shirt that John O'Keefe was wearing consistent or inconsistent with the shirt that's on the ATD?
It was inconsistent compared to the sweatshirt that Mr. John O'Keefe was wearing.
What is the orientation of that arm as it relates to the vehicle that we'll see?
So it will make contact with the taillight, although I will note in this test, ultimately the contact ended up being more of a clip or a side swipe in this test.
Go ahead. Did you see the impact area?
It's quick.
Right. What did you mean when you said more of a side swipe or a clip?
So I think the next couple of videos will help demonstrate that.
Let's move on to the next one. What are we looking at in this video? Or, I'm sorry, in this photograph?
So this is going to be a high speed or a slow-mo video. You're going to see the Lexus come in from the right and then move across the screen to the left. And you'll see contact occur between the taillight and the arm.
Okay. Can you explain for the jurors using this video what you meant by more of a side swipe or a clip?
Right. So this is where the hand and the wrist are kind of in the area of the quarter panel taillight, and then a portion of the forearm in contact with, I'm sorry, what I previously said, the wrist and the hand in contact with the lift gate portion of the taillight, and then on the forearm is more in contact with the quarter panel taillight.
Okay. Can we move to the next slide? And what is this angle?
This is, yeah, same test, just a different angle with the high-speed cameras in slow motion.
And this is at 15 miles per hour, correct?
15 miles an hour, correct.
Can you explain for the jurors, given the fact that this is suspended, does that have any impact on the ultimate analysis or reconstruction, rather than being attached to an ATD?
Effectively, mass is mass. So whether we have an arm that is suspended or attached, again, it's the arm is on a joint, right? So the arm can accelerate freely of the rest of the body, right? So if anything, even if it is attached to the body, there may actually be some additional force associated with that, just because there could be more mass attached to it.
Understood. Okay, let's go ahead and play this video. Can we go to the next slide, please? What are we looking at in these three photographs?
So you're looking at, on the left, starting from left to right, just at contact, and then just after contact, and then post-contact. So as I mentioned, you can see that in this first one at contact, again, we don't have, the hand isn't and the arm aren't positioned as far out on the previous tests, and the hand is in the area and the wrist of the lift gate taillight, with part of the forearm in contact with the quarter panel taillight. And as you saw in the video, essentially the arm just kind of moves out of the way of the vehicle as it comes by.
Understood. Next slide, please. What are we looking at here?
This is a photograph of the test vehicle subsequent to the test, depicting the, I'll say, lack of damage to the taillights.
Describe what you did see in terms of damage or lack of damage on the taillight.
There was no damage or fracturing to the taillights.
This next video is the 29 mile per hour impact test.
What are we looking at in this video?
So this is going to be a slow motion video. You'll see the Lexus accelerate in reverse, making contact with the arm. And again, this is the 29 mile per hour impact test.
Okay. Next slide, please. And what is this?
This is a video, a high-speed video, so slow motion of test D at 29 miles per hour into the ATD arm that is suspended. So you'll see the Lexus enter the frame from the right and impact the arm.
Okay. Was this strike more reflective of what you were attempting to replicate?
Yes, this was a more central impact to the arm, yes.
Thank you. Next slide, please. And what is this?
So this is a high-speed or slow-motion video depicting the test D at 29 miles per hour, just a different perspective than the previous video.
Okay. Next slide. And what are we looking at here?
So this is extracted frames from the high-speed video. So starting out left to right, this is roughly at first contact with the majority of the hand, well, the hand, the majority of the forearm in contact with the liftgate taillight, with a portion of the elbow in contact with the quarter panel taillight.
Can I stop you right there on that far left frame? Does that fairly replicate what you were attempting to approximate in terms of the orientation of the arm versus the taillight?
Yes, more of a central impact compared to that first test at 15, yes.
Is that more or less consistent with what you saw in Dr. Welcher's test where he had his arm in that still shot associated with the geometry of the car?
Sustained.
Is this consistent with what you were trying to replicate after your review of Dr. Welcher's report?
Sustained. Can I ask it differently?
What were you trying to replicate, or why were you trying to replicate this at the 29 mile an hour test in this particular orientation?
We were trying to see, based upon Dr. Welcher's orientation, what happens to the arm in terms of the acceleration and the damage to the taillight at that configuration at contact.
Okay, next slide, please. What are we looking at?
So this is a photograph depicting the damage to the liftgate taillight as well as the quarter panel taillight.
And what do you note in terms of that damage?
So on the liftgate taillight, a significant portion of that thick 5 millimeter red outer lens is fractured and broken off. The underlying diffusers are still in place. There was a small crack in, I believe it was the upper diffuser here. The quarter panel taillight had the clear section damaged with the outer lens missing, along with some fragments from the outer portion of the red part of the lens.
Next slide, please. What are we looking at in this slide?
So this is another photograph depicting the quarter panel taillight. As I indicated, there is portions of the red lens cover missing. The interior diffusers remained largely intact in this test.
Next slide. What is this side-by-side depicting?
This is showing the results of the 29 mile per hour impact test to the test vehicle compared to that of the subject taillight.
Given that orientation of test D, were you able to reach any opinions or conclusions as to whether or not the damage to the subject taillight is consistent with striking an arm at 29 miles per hour?
It was inconsistent.
Now, this is a little weird, but after increasing in speed to 29 miles per hour, Dr. Wolf conducted a test at 24 miles per hour. But this time, instead of just using the arm, like the dummy arm, he actually used an entire test dummy, which weighed about 200 pounds. And here are those results.
What is this photograph showing in terms of the orientation of the arm and the hybrid test dummy, or ATD?
So the orientation is to depict, again, the orientation that Dr. Welcher indicated in his static and dynamic test to show what happens when again, that ATD arm that we had is attached to a test dummy and is struck at 24 miles per hour.
Next slide, please. And what is this?
So this is a thermal image of the taillights just after the install with the average temperature at about just over 33 degrees Fahrenheit.
Next slide. And what are we looking at?
So you're looking at a top-down drone video with the Lexus here on the left that will accelerate in reverse up to 24 miles an hour, striking the ATD arm.
Let's watch that, please. Next slide. What are we looking at in this slide?
So this is a top-down video from atop of the forklift, or where the arm is suspended, attached to the dummy. So you're going to see the vehicle enter from the bottom into going to the top of the screen.
Next slide. What is this view?
It's just another perspective. This is a slow motion video where you'll see the Lexus in reverse. I think this one actually has kind of a long build up before it starts here.
And could we go to the next slide, please? And what is this?
So this is a perspective from the high-speed camera, so a slow motion video with the Lexus reversing into the ATD arm at 24 miles per hour.
Before you play this, Dr. Wolf, I failed to ask this, it may be obvious. After each of the tests, C, D, E, F, were you replacing the taillight with new exemplar taillights that had been temperature accounted for?
Yes, every test had a new set of quarter panel taillights, as well as liftgate taillights. And even in the test where the taillight in the 50 mile an hour test where the taillight was not damaged, we still put on new taillights. We did not repurpose or reuse any of the taillights.
Okay, thank you. If you could play this for us, please. Next slide. In this configuration, was the ATD outfitted with the hoodie that you earlier described?
Yes.
At the time you outfitted the ATD with the hoodie in this configuration before this test E, did you confirm that the sleeve, the right sleeve, was damaged or undamaged?
After this test?
No, before.
Before? It was undamaged before the test.
Okay. What are we looking at in this slide?
So this is still frames from the high speed. So starting out on the left here, just at contact. So the forearm making contact with the liftgate taillight, and then the upper part of the forearm and the elbow making contact, a direct hit into the quarter panel taillight. And the middle here is just after contact. And on the right is post contact.
Thank you. Next slide, please. What are we looking at in this video or in this picture?
So this is a overall photograph depicting the taillights subsequent to this test at 24 miles per hour. I will note that there's no damage to the liftgate taillight, and then there is damage to the quarter panel taillight.
Is there any damage to the internal diffusers on this taillight?
So if I go to the next photograph, if I may.
Please.
So you can see here, there is this kind of thicker, it's actually not a crack. So I'm looking at the clear diffuser here with the dots that you see. This line that you see, kind of opaque. I don't know if you've got a laser pointer to,
Yes.
just so there's no confusion, thank you. So the line right here that's part of the assembly. So that's just a part of how the plastic is molded. There's a very small crack right here in the underlying diffuser, but all of the remaining part of the diffuser in terms of this portion here and here are all intact, and same with this portion of it.
What about the chrome piece that's running between the diffusers?
I don't believe that was damaged during this test, no.
And what about the clear acrylic toward the top left of that taillight housing?
It was partially fractured, but not the entire outer portion of it.
Next slide, please. What is this depicting?
So this is a photograph depicting the quarter panel taillight subsequent to the 24 mile an hour impact test with the ATD arm compared to that of the subject taillight.
Based on this test, were you able to reach any opinions and conclusions as to whether the damage to the subject taillight is consistent with striking John O'Keefe's arm at 24 miles an hour?
Sustained in that form.
Were you able to reach any opinions or conclusions as to whether the damage to the subject taillight is consistent with striking an arm at 24 miles per hour?
Based upon the test results, it's inconsistent with striking an arm.
On what do you base that opinion?
I base it upon the test results that I've shown in terms of the video and the data acquisition.
Can you describe that in a little bit more detail?
So during this test, we had the instrumented hybrid arm outstretched from the test dummy with the accelerometer on the hand, the forearm. We had data acquisition on the vehicle, monitoring the speeds of the vehicle. We accelerated that vehicle into the arm at 24 miles an hour to conduct a dynamic impact test to collect data certainly about the acceleration that the arm experienced, but then also make observations about the damage that we observed to the taillight.
Do you hold that opinion that we've just discussed to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty?
Yes.
And were your tests conducted in accordance with methodologies that are generally accepted in the field of accident reconstruction in this particular test cycle?
Yes.
After Dr. Wolf finished describing that clip that I just showed you, he also discussed how there was also no damage to the sweatshirt. Here is the last test, and this one was conducted at 29 miles per hour with the entire test dummy.
What are we going to expect to see in this video?
So in this video, you'll see in the surveillance video, the Lexus will come from the right to left, strike the Rescue Randy, and then you'll see the Rescue Randy projected and slide on the ground.
Okay. Can you play that one more time, please? Next slide, please. What are we looking at in this series of photographs?
So this is a extract from our VBox software and data acquisition system. So on the top, you'll see the video. On the bottom is the data. So this is another feed that we had of video. This was triggered, so we do have data from this perspective. So what you'll see is my colleague will move away from the assembly with the dry ice, and then the vehicle will accelerate in reverse.
That was my question. The blue, that's dry ice, gloves?
You can't, you don't want to touch dry ice with your bare hands. So
Okay.
it's, he's wearing gloves. He's capturing the thermal images now.
Next slide, please. And what are we looking at in this?
So these are extracted frames from that video you just saw from the data acquisition system. So on the left here is just before contact between the test dummy and the Lexus. on the right is just at contact.
Next slide, please. And what are we seeing in these series of photos?
So this is obviously during the collision sequence. The body now has loaded into the lift gate and the back window. What you're seeing here is the back window shattering. And this is just a few split second later in time where, again, the body is continuing to move with the vehicle as it's contacted.
Next slide. And what is this?
This depicts the post-impact damage to the rear of the Lexus. As I noted, the rear window is completely shattered. There's deformation and crush to the liftgate section of the vehicle. The bumper step was popped out, and then there was some minor fracturing in the bumper cover at the lower level.
Did you note anything regarding the internal components of the exemplar taillight, even at this direct impact?
So the taillight, as you can see, it blew out the outer lens cover. I believe the part of the clear diffusers were actually still in place. I think the lower one might have been fractured here, but I think the upper one was still in place.
At 29 miles an hour with a direct impact, did the exemplar taillight exhibit the same type of damage to the diffuser as the subject taillight?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
More or less damage in this photo to the diffuser specifically than in the subject taillight?
Well, I think there was more in the subject taillight. As I mentioned, I believe the top diffuser
More
on this
damage?
was correct.
Okay. That was my question. And is there another slide at on the back end of this one?
That's it.
Okay.
So after the presentation of all those tests, Defense Attorney Jackson had one very important question for Dr. Wolf.
Dr. Wolf, you conducted tests at what miles per hour? Tell me the sequence.
It would be 10 miles per hour, 17 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour, 29 miles per hour, 24 miles per hour, and then a full-on hit at 29 miles per hour.
Regarding all of the tests you conducted, what did you observe with regard to the damage, if any, to the internal components of the quarter panel taillight? And I'm talking about the chrome pieces and the diffusers.
It was less in all of the tested taillights than that of the subject taillight.
Did you reach any opinions or conclusions as to whether the damage to the right rear taillight of the subject 2021 Lexus is consistent with an impact to John O'Keefe's right arm during a high-speed reversing maneuver?
Sustained in that form, Mr. Jackson.
Did you reach any opinions or conclusions as to whether the damage to the right rear taillight of the subject vehicle is consistent or inconsistent with an impact to a right arm during a high-speed reversing maneuver?
It was inconsistent.
So that basically wrapped up the direct examination, and then it was Brennan for cross-examination. During cross, Brennan leaned in on the fact that for one of the certifications that Dr. Wolf took for accident reconstruction, he failed, one of the very first portions the first time. But, it seemed a little bit elementary when considering that his own expert lied about his BS degree. Anyway, Brennan also pressed hard on how most of the tests conducted by ARCA only used a test dummy arm, and the results could have been different had they used full-body dummies for all the tests and not just the last two. But this came off also, this might be my personal opinion, or this might be what a juror might be thinking, but this came off a bit smug considering that the prosecution's own witness only used blue paint and also only went as high as 2 miles per hour in conducting their own tests. But I do think that Brennan made a good point that full body dummy testing and different angles could have resulted in different conclusions. And for that, they kind of went back and forth, but Dr. Wolf did agree. In addition to everything I just talked about, Brennan also got out that Dr. Wolf used an app called Signal, which is an encrypted communication app to communicate with the defense team at their request. But the biggest impact that Brennan got from Cross was right here. Now, I am going to speed this video up again because it does take a bit of time.
Now, this is a direct hit.
Correct.
Is this simply a photo or a video? Could we go to the next one, please? So the rescue Randy's placed much further in the car than the other type of test that would be more similar to a clip, yes?
Correct.
Next photo, please. Okay. And that is the result of the impact?
Correct.
Do you see the debris field?
Yes.
Is it near rescue Randy?
Some of it is, yes.
Yeah. It's spread out a little bit, yes?
That's fair, yes.
But it's not right on his body. It's a distance from his body, yes?
There may be some, I can't tell from this photo, there may be some around his body, but yes, there's also debris closer to the Lexus as well.
And and this is the demonstration where you didn't turn on the videotape, so we don't have a videotape?
Correct, we had the false start, yep.
What's that?
We had the false start.
The false start. Is there another picture after this? Those clothes. Are there holes or tears in the clothes?
Yes, there's damage that's consistent with road rash when clothing or a body makes contact with the pavement and is grinding into the pavement.
Pavement's hard.
Yes.
How about frozen ground, frozen dirt?
Is that hard?
Yeah.
I suppose it can be.
Well, do you have any doubt whether frozen ground in the Northeast in the winter is hard as a rock?
I haven't done any analysis to assess that.
And so seeing holes in those clothes is what you would expect after Randy hits that hard ground, right?
Are you talking about frozen grass or pavement?
I'm talking about Randy right now. These holes in the clothes are what you would expect after Randy hits the hard ground, correct?
Objection. I'm going to allow that. Is that what you'd expect? All right, jurors, feel free to stand up and stretch.
So holes in the clothes is what you would expect after Randy hits the ground, yes?
If there is prolonged sliding contact with the asphalt, certainly you could expect to see tearing, large holes, material fraying, and even transfer of pavement material onto the clothing.
You've done no studies on hard ground, like a front yard, have you?
In terms of a pedestrian sliding on the grass?
And clothing tears, yes.
No, sir.
And if you could go back one slide. You see the debris field is near but not on Randy? Can you tell if there's any small pieces or microscopic pieces on or in Randy's clothes in the study? Did you look?
No.
If I could go to test E, please. Test E you cite as having a speed of 24 miles per hour, correct?
Correct.
And that's with a arm that is 9.38 pounds. Yes?
Correct.
And to remind you, Mr. O'Keefe's arm would be about 11.86 pounds. Yes?
Correct.
If you would reduce 26%, you'd be at 17.8 miles per hour, wouldn't you?
Objection. Are you doing the math, Dr. Wolf?
I don't agree with his characterization. Your
Okay,
Honor.
next question.
I understand you don't agree, but if you took 26% off at 24 miles per hour, you would come up to 17.8 miles per hour, wouldn't you?
I'm going to allow that. I'm going to allow that.
That's what the calculation would yield.
Okay. On test E, there are some differences between your test and what would happen in real life. For example, there is a harness, correct?
Correct.
And the harness prevents the dummy from being thrown naturally.
Correct.
The harness affects your ability or one's ability to see the study and see what the trajectory would be after impact, correct?
Well, that wasn't the purpose of the study, to assess the trajectory, sir.
I understand. I'm not trying to criticize, but it affects the ability to see the trajectory when the dummy's on a harness, doesn't it?
Yes.
Could we put up the first video on this, please? A photo 115, if we can start with. If you'd stop it right there. And you can see the feet aren't as firmly planted on the ground as a person would be in most circumstances because of that harness, yes?
Correct.
And that affects gravity, doesn't it?
Affects gravity?
Well, when the car hits, the gravity, the weight of the dummy is less because it's held up by a harness, isn't it?
Right. So gravity really is, again, is suspended at this point, just above the ground.
The arm that's extended, is there a glass in that hand?
No, there's not more weight in the hand.
So there's no object in the hand in any of these tests?
No, because ultimately what would happen is because of the accelerometer being mounted on the palm of the hand, if you had a glass there, it would interfere with those measurements.
I understand why you didn't do it, but would you say it's fair to say that if a glass was in the dummy's hand on these tests, it could affect or change the damage?
Well, if you add another, I think that the drinking glass we utilized for the testing last year, I think was 0.7 pounds. So if you add another 0.7 or pound to the hand, that hand contacts the liftgate taillight, you certainly could see damage to that taillight, which we certainly didn't see on the subject vehicle.
So weight does kind of matter, right?
It can, yes.
Not just 0.7 pounds, the 2.5 pounds can matter too. Weight matters.
Yes.
Because that's kind of what we were talking about for the last half hour. Weight matters in these tests, doesn't it?
Correct. But you can't look at this in isolation just between damage, and you can't separate it from the injuries, right? What's going to happen to the body in terms of the injuries in a 24-mile-an-hour impact?
Does weight matter?
In terms of the force?
And so we see this dummy with the arm stretched out, correct?
Correct.
Okay, can we bring this back? Stop right there. This isn't approved crash test dummy, is it?
The Rescue Randy portion, no. It's not instrumented like a hybrid.
Is the arm the hybrid 3?
Yes, the arm is the hybrid
So
3.
you took, in test F, you didn't put the hybrid 3 on the Randy, but on this one you did?
No, because you risk these AT devices can range from $100,000 to $150,000, and you run the risk of destroying that equipment in a test like that.
So in test F, did you put the hybrid on the Randy, or did you keep Randy's original arm?
It's just the Rescue Randy in the last test.
On F.
Correct.
This one, you have the hybrid arm on Randy.
Correct.
So you're switching up between tests. What pieces you're using, aren't you?
I would say adding, but
Well, adding and subtracting. It doesn't have two arms. There's one off, one on. One's Randy and one's hybrid. So you're switching.
yes.
Different result.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay.
Are you trying to say a different result between test F and this test? Because they're not the same test.
Oh, I understand. I understand. If we can have this come back a little bit more. Okay, and let it run. Stop. You can see the shattered taillight moving, and most of it's moving in the same direction, isn't it?
Yes.
And that's what creates a debris field after a collision, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, components will break off and fall to the ground, yes.
Now, since Randy is on a harness, he's not going to be thrown the same way as it would happen in real life, is he?
Correct, and that wasn't the purpose of this test, sir.
Understand. When you chose 24 miles per hour without the 26% deduction, which would make it 17.8 miles per hour, when you chose 24 miles per hour, it's because you had looked at the text stream data that had been taken from the defendant's Lexus, right?
Correct.
And when you looked at that data, you understood that during that event, 10 seconds of data is captured, yes?
Yes.
But that doesn't define the whole event, does it?
That only encompasses what was recorded.
And you said you chose 24 miles per hour because that was about the speed at the end of that 10 seconds.
Correct.
You do realize at the end of that 10 seconds, the car, the defendant's Lexus, was going faster. It was still accelerating, don't you?
Objection. I'm going to allow it.
From what I recall, the last data point, I believe the throttle was still around 74%.
Well, ARCA specializes in text stream data, don't they?
Yes.
Okay. So you looking at that, you would agree that at the end of the 10 seconds, the defendant's Lexus was increasing in speed.
Well, we don't know, again, beyond that data point, what the data is.
At the end of that 10 seconds, the car was going up, not down, in speed, yes?
Correct.
And you can't tell how much longer that car traveled for after that 10 seconds, can you?
Correct, we don't know.
So when you chose the 24 miles per hour, it was just based on a data point. It wasn't based on you believing that there was an impact at a certain speed, was it?
No, and the triggering event itself it's not a collision by definition, and nowhere in that data can you parse out whether or not any contact even occurred.
We know that.
Okay.
The point is, you can't tell how fast the vehicle was going if it was in a collision from that data, can you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
If that vehicle was in a collision, you wouldn't be able to tell from that data what the speed was at the time of the collision.
If contact allegedly occurred at some point in that data set, no, you would not be able to pick a row in that data and say, this is where the collision occurred.
Or after that data set, you would have no idea.
Outside of the data?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
Okay, so I know that I played a lot of clips from Dr. Wolf's testimony today, but I do think that this is so important for you as an alternate to see and understand. Honestly, that last video clip actually continued, and I thought it was interesting to watch because it actually showed the test dummy's one shoe come off really close to the car. Additionally, I'm not sure if you noticed, but in the video where the test dummy body flew, its body was much more centered to the vehicle, so it's not a surprise that the outer tail light did not break. But you'll have to go back to rewatch it to know what I'm talking about. Again, if you weren't able to watch this episode, I would suggest going back to watch because I think it is super helpful to watch all of these tests and how they played out. Dr. Wolf wrapped up the rest of day 28, and on day 29, we will wrap up with redirect. And then we will get on to a new witness. So tell me, what are your thoughts after seeing those tests? Were they helpful for the defense? Or were they helpful for the prosecution? Let me know in the comments section. Also, we just put out the Sean Combs Week 4 recap. So if you aren't caught up on that trial, now is your chance to catch up. All right, alternates, I will see you on day 29. But until then, think like a juror, decide like one too.